Kia ora everyone. Welcome to the Social Sustainability Committee meeting this Thursday, the 19th of June. I nearly read out the time. Anyway, welcome to everybody that's here. Welcome to everyone that's in the public gallery, and just acknowledging, I think Nigel online. Is that correct? There we go. Nigel online. Yep. No, that's good to see you there, Nigel. Right, we'll just start off with the council blessing, and Mike, would you perhaps care to do that?
As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in the spirit of harmony and compassion.
Good order. Thank you for that, Mike. We are the Social Sustainability Committee. We do have groups coming in from the community, so I just have a sensitive content caution that I read out at the beginning of each meeting. And that is, the Social Sustainability Committee considers matters across health, education, justice, housing, community connectiveness and resilience. To enable full and transparent discussions across these areas, topics may be raised that could be sensitive to some viewers. We encourage meeting participants to be mindful of this when discussing these matters, and for those viewing to use their discretion. Participants within the room are welcome to choose to leave the room if a topic of a sensitive nature is discussed, and those online are able to leave the live streaming and return when they are comfortable. Right, item number 3, apologies. Any apologies? I haven't received any. Have I? No? Fantastic, thank you. Do I need to do a motion on the apologies? Sorry, no, okay. Declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda, I've received none. Cool. Sorry, I know. Public speaking time, I have no speakers registered at the moment. No. Deputations. Fantastic. Well, we have our fantastic Kapiti Health Advisory Group here today, and two wonderful people, Graham Scott and Claire Hind, from the mental health workstream. Well, they're the leads in the mental health workstream for KHAG. Sandra Daly is an apology today. She's normally here as well, but if you perhaps care to make your way up to the table. This is in line with the various working streams that are part of the Kapiti Health Advisory Group. We have set up a system where each one comes through. It's on about a 6-meeting cycle, and at the moment we're up to mental health. So I look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, for this invitation to present an update with the work from the Kapiti Health Advisory Group on mental health, and also there's an ad hoc issue that I happen to have some background in that I've also added, which is about falls and fractures, which is not inherently much to do with mental health, but in some cases might be. So let me take you back to where we were with our last presentation to you, and then give you an update from there. In our previous presentation, we mentioned to you that our estimates just using national data, because local data is hard to come by, but I'll come to that matter soon. We expect there's 3,000 young people with mental health and related problems living in the area. The services available to them, I'm sorry, let me push this for you. Right, the services available to them, the most common one is known as CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, for people up to 18 through the Kapiti Health Centre. And then there's the Kapiti Youth Support, which is quite an extraordinary feature of this landscape around here, going back to the mid-90s when it was started with money from the Central Regional Health Authority and has flourished since. It's got 5,000 people enrolled in it, and by various estimates, something like 60% or more of young people in this target group are engaged with it one way or another. It's extraordinary. 28% of those are Māori. It includes what it does alongside mental health. It's an example of one of these, they call them navigator models, where an organisation will give access to a whole lot of different kinds of services from people who show up and are diagnosed and triaged and so on. And so they provide education services under the alt-ed policies of the government for young people who've mostly been expelled from local schools, housing services and other services that they offer. 60% of the people they deal with have complex needs. They also note a trend that's around the country, which is the degree of severity of young people going into these kinds of services is trending up. The school counsellors carry a lot of the load, and we've interviewed some of them, and they're the first port of call for a lot of the young people who have mental health issues of one kind or another. The system is badly short-staffed. Vulnerable teenagers are waiting months for appointments, and they get worse while they wait. Younger kids are not being served well, and you may be aware of the research that's been done on what's generally known as the Dunedin study, which followed the life courses of a group of people over a very long period of time, and the research that's been done on it has led to one quite robust conclusion that the first years of a child's life have a long-lasting impact on the rest of their life, and that includes mental health. And so not enough really is available at that level, but I should add that the social investment work being done by the government, which I have some involvement in as chair of the Social Investment Advisory Board, is thinking about what to do about that, and there are programs that you may be aware were announced in the budget, which are based on this notion of trying to get to young people early and attend to their needs. But at the moment, the buck is stopping with the schools. So I've interviewed school counsellors in one of our high schools near here who talk of, at worst, kids who are sounding suicidal, but they've just got to keep dealing with them in the school until some sort of service becomes available to them, and in the meantime they're getting worse. Also, there's a lot of young people who've numerous and easily understood reasons really don't want to go to the family doctor and talk about their mental problems, because some of those are actually coming from the family and they don't want the family to know. And also in the Polynesian community around here, which is relatively small compared with other parts of the region, it's a small community and it gets around, and so it's reported to me that Polynesian kids like to be attended to away from the circuits in which their families revolve. Well, what's been happening since the previous presentation that I made, after months of negotiating with Stats New Zealand to try and get a study done of mental health issues around here, I finally gave up, and but through the fact that I was dealing with the Social Investment Agency with my other hat on, I managed to get them to do a study of some aspects of youth mental health around here, and I'd like to report to you what that showed. In particular, it was studying the link between deprivation, and the wellbeing statisticians have an index of deprivation that takes account of various things, and to track that against the use of mental health services. I should add that in this area, the mental health services provided by GPs provide no data. And this contrasts very strongly with the outstanding example of Canterbury and then across the South Island, where the major PHOs all agreed to put their data into the Canterbury DHB under various protections, so they have much better data down there than we've got, and I'm hoping that this government will do something about that. Well, you would have expected that the relationship between deprivation and the incidence of mental health would be. Who's that? You'd have you'd have expected it to be adversely affected by deprivation, so you'd therefore expect a positive correlation between mental health usage and deprivation. But the data which I'll show you says exactly the opposite, which is quite a serious issue. If you have a look there, all you need to pick up from that diagram is that as you move along the base, the deprivation index shows greater levels of deprivation. And if you look at the long blue lines sticking up, that's the use of mental health services, and the ones that are subsidised through enrolled providers. And the light blue shows the use of casual walk-in services. And the disturbing thing about that diagram is that the worse off you are, the less likely you are to be getting mental health services from an enrolled provider, and the more likely you are to be using casual services which are not subsidised. If you look at the pattern around our region that draws off the same database, what you can see is those little green dots are where this relationship shows up most strongly. And it shows up in rural areas, and it shows up in the northern part of our region. So there is substantial evidence that you've got quite a population of young people up there underserved by mental health services. So what have we done since then? We've continued to work towards what we would call a community mental health program, because the council's not going to get into delivering mental health services, but there are a lot of things around this community which are favourable to a better integration between community services and mental health services. And so what we've done is a lot of research onto international literature on what community outreach around mental health actually means. And there are examples from, particularly from certain states or cities in the United States and from the United Kingdom. But of course, in both those places, local government has more of a mandate in the area of social services than local governments do in New Zealand. But that said, there's still a lot of things that you see in those places which could be adapted around here. So we've been working to understand the concept and how it works. And some of you might be aware that there is a program that was developed in Canterbury called Mana Ake, which was a youth mental health program centred around a collaboration of schools linked into the mental health services. And keeping in mind that Canterbury had much better integrated primary, secondary and community services to begin with, this program was a natural addition to what they had done. Also, we've been talking to Amajit Maxwell from Think Aura up the road, and obviously knows a lot about this community as well. And she will share knowledge about this with us as well. I've mentioned Carolyn Gullery and David Mates. David was the Chief Executive of the Canterbury District Health Board, and Carolyn Gullery was the Planning and Funding Manager, and they were deeply involved in the creation of those integrated services down there, and in particular Mana Ake. We've got available to us reports on what are the rates of social return on these kinds of interventions, and they are substantial and positive. So we've headed off in a direction of thinking, well, how could you get something like the Mana Ake program adopted here, and who would we have to talk into doing it? But we're certainly plugged into the people who know most about it, who have appeared before our advisory group and presented advice to us on how you might think about that It's worth just noting in passing the way in which the changes in the Whānau Ora program that were implemented by the present government will affect us. It's too early to see anything on the ground, but it's worth noting that whereas the funding of Whānau Ora activities around here were previously under the control of the organisation in Auckland, dominated by John Tamahiri. And whereas now that contract has been shifted to the Runanga of Ngāti Toa. And so they'll be managing about 38 million of this in the North Island, south of Taupo. There's another organisation that does it north of there. But one of the aspects of this, which personally I think was unfortunate, is that in making these changes about who got the job of distributing the money and commissioning the local providers, the government forced on them a requirement that they use what they call navigators as the way of doing it. Now, a navigator is somebody who will figure out for people who demographics and targets of people who need assistance of one kind or another, that they'll sort of steer them to where the service they need is. And within the context of social investment, that is only one of many ways of getting services to people who need them. And in particular, it is very different from Dame Turia's original vision of Whānau Ora, which was about healthy families, and healthy in a broad sense of Māori concepts of, Māori and Wairua, in addition to kids going to school and being healthy and so on. So this is quite a substantial change, and it's away from what social investment is generally intended to mean, which is back to taking the original philosophy of Whānau Ora, but spreading it more broadly away from things that are administered through TPK into a broader landscape of social service delivery. So in time we'll find out from the people who've been getting Whānau Ora around here, money around here, what these changes mean to them, and it's something we'll keep an eye on, but it's too soon to know how that's going to work. Look, that's it for the youth mental health. I'll come back with some more information about that later, but I now invite Claire to talk about mental health for the elderly.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. I haven't got much to add on what I talked about 6 months ago, when it was last time we were here. But there is no further funding from Health New Zealand for local providers of services. Primarily here we have Dementia Wellington, who do the community providing services. So that's a problem, because we do have a National Dementia Action Plan, and until the government actually funds some of that, then the people who give out the money won't actually give the money out to dementia providers. And as we have a very high older population and on the Kapiti Coast, as you're well aware, then we do have a high incidence that I talked about last time. So if there's not the community support, then there's an increase in acute hospital admissions, which causes a huge amount of stress in the community. So what can we do on a local basis as a council and as a community? So we can, as I said before, focus on the public facilities and have inclusive events. And I am watching very carefully the design of the inside of the Waikanai Library, because I've been asking several times to make sure that it is age-friendly and dementia-friendly. And it doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to have the right carpet and the right chairs so people can get in and out. Not everybody wants a beanbag when they go to the library. So the other big thing in our area is the Health New Zealand review of aged care. This was led by a gentleman called Andy Inder, and not surprisingly, he's no longer with Health New Zealand. And so, because there's still lots and lots of restructuring going on in Health New Zealand, makes it really hard to navigate the landscape. And the person who's taken over this is somebody who's been in the space before, so we're not sure how long that will take to be released. So this was a review really triggered by the funding model for the aged residential care facilities, but it also included some community support services. It didn't include the really grassroots ones, it really included the funded home and community support that people go in and help with personal cares and medication and things like that, not the really grassroots thing. So until that comes out, nothing really is going to help with the aged care, whether it's in the physical or the mental health space.
Thank you. Since preparing these slides, only this week, the government, through the Minister of Mental Health, Matt Ducey, has made some announcements which I think are significant, and I'll cover what is known about them. It includes a commitment to having a 10-year mental health plan, and of course we'll see what evolves there. Plans come and plans go, but it's positive, I think, that there is a dedicated Minister to mental health, and he seems to have persuaded his colleagues that they need a structured way of thinking about over a longer period of time, which is in itself good. But looking at things that have been announced that are more detailed and relevant to us here, there was an announcement of a suicide prevention strategy, and that mentions being community-based, and so far as I can tell from the announcement, what that means is peer support groups for suicidal teenagers, and special services for Maori and Pacific that are more culturally sensitive to their requirements, and with youth mental health, I think that really matters, that the people who are addressing these young people's needs are able to do so in an appropriate way to whatever culture they happen to have come from. There's more attention to crisis response, what happens when these young people do get in a very difficult situation. Of course, that relates to the changing role of the police about what they will be doing when the Mental Health Act is invoked where people are in serious crisis. More widely on youth mental health, they're talking about a program which is school-based, which I think's good given the Mana Ake program and the fact that all of these young people, one way or another, are connected to a school or have been expelled from one, although there are a lot of kids around the country that just go missing. There is mental health education, presumably through schools, but through other instrumentalities as well. More on counselling services and sort of nationwide networks of secondary schools sharing information and so on. Again, this all looks to me like it was based pretty much on Mana Ake, because Matt Ducey was the MP from Waimakariri, I think is the name of the electorate, but he was involved in Canterbury when the Mana Ake program was developing. So what he's announced here has the flavour of taking that nationally. And there was a budget announcement of $250 million that's going to be spent on improved mental health services, which is small in one way of looking at it, but significant in another way of looking at it. So that brings you right up to date with where we are now. And so I'll just conclude my presentation with falls and fractures. Just to establish why I know anything about it in your minds, I was engaged as a consultant by ACC some years ago to work with them and with the DHBs on the development of a national program for managing falls and fractures in the elderly. And the programs that are available for this are the community strength and balance classes. There's also an app called Nimble, and vitamin D supplements, particularly in winter for elderly people who don't get enough sunshine to manufacture their own. There's a fracture liaison service for people who are injured in falls to follow up with all the things they need to get back to full mobility and so on. The target population for these programs is over 65 for New Zealand European and 55 plus for Maori and Pacifica. And I just wanted to mention, and you can see in the last line there, that there have been calculations done of what is the fiscal and social benefit from these kinds of programs, and the rate of return is an astonishing 520%. To give you an example of that in reality, when this was done in Canterbury, they spent $1.5 million per annum and saved $12 to $15 million as a result of people who predictably would have fallen and didn't. Now, the way they calculate that is using this database known as the Integrated Data Infrastructure, the IDI, which the government has all its administrative data in a single place and subject to very tight privacy controls, will develop forecasts of a background population. You say people in this kind of age group and these kinds of conditions predictably will have this number of falls. Now you put the program in place and see how much it dropped, and it was on that basis that they calculated this astonishing rate of return. But it's an unfortunate feature of the way our health system and maybe our government systems more widely work that the powers that be often resist this sort of thing. And in the end, of all the DHBs, it was only Canterbury that did this, and it's astonishing, but that's the way it is. And it really needs to be fixed by a government that's willing to push harder to get these things done. So just to finish, we want to assess what is the situation around Kapiti with respect to the picture I've just given you. And of course the data doesn't exist for us to know, but we'll chase after it, and I've approached ACC to the manager, Renee Graham, who heads the injury prevention, and she was the one that gave me the data about the 520%, so ACC is highly motivated by these kinds of benefits from more attention to falls and fractures in elderly people. It's surprising that there are more claims for falls made to ACC than workplace injuries. This is a really big deal, and huge amounts of money are spent on it. Just finally, the chair of CAHAG asked me to mention to you that we had a very good meeting with Robin Shearer from Health New Zealand last Friday, and Sandra was keen for me to pass this on. We've had, over my period of involvement with the Council's interests in health, a lot of trouble getting engagement with the health authorities, and in some cases quite hostile responses like, you know, what the hell are you people doing hanging around, this kind of response. So it was a big step forward for us that this person, Robin Shearer, is the regional liaison for this part of the country. And we had a very good meeting with her, mostly about the work that you know that the group's been doing on a polyclinic around here, but we also covered these other issues as well. And I'm hopeful that through at last having a counterparty we can have an adult relationship with, we may be able to start getting hold of some of this data we've been unable to find. And I should note that ACC has promised to share their claims data for this area with us. So we'll go on working on it to see whether our area, which has a high proportion of elderly people and therefore a lot of falls going on, whether we're up to par with best practices about prevention, or whether there's something that we can do either ourselves at community level or just through lobbying for more attention from the central authorities to do more in this area. And we'll keep watching on that and report back to you on another occasion. So, Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you, and we're happy to answer any questions people have.
Look, thank you very much, Graham and Claire. Again, excellent presentation. I was just looking at my notes back from August, and yeah, all paths lead to KYS. I just had a couple of quick things I wanted to touch on. Appreciate your comments around the meeting last Friday. It's one of those things, we're very fortunate that we've got Chris, Pavan and Gina, who have both worked in this sector and in central government. And I guess it just showed to me that this stuff doesn't happen by magic, and there's been a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes with regards to building those relationships from a KCDC perspective as well. So that tied in with all the fantastic work you guys are doing, it's good to see we're starting to get some traction. But after saying that, you know, we've built good foundations, I think, moving forward in this space. And this is the result of that, hopefully, and it's a progressive pathway that will only get better as we move forward. One quick question I had. You mentioned KYS, and it talks, you talked about the navigator models that they have. Then you also talked about the funding that's coming through that government's pushing for navigators as such. And we had the lecture breakfast the other week, last week, where Nicola Widders talked about KYS specifically and talked about bulk funding as well. Do you think there's some way that that can be tied together to get them some better pathways for their funding as such?
Yes, I do. It was actually on the basis of knowing what was going on for KYS that they have a very large number of contracts, a lot of them from health, but others from education and other places. It's probably not appropriate to tell you exactly what it is, but it's dozens. And as a result of that, I raised with the Social Investment Agency, before, incidentally, I became chair of this advisory group, which means I'm sort of conflicted out of doing that sort of thing now, but I wasn't then. And so I brought to their attention that we had a very important provider of services in this area that was tangled in red tape and spending nearly a quarter of their money on just managing all the controls and audits and so on around it. And so while I haven't been able to keep in touch with them, I understand that they are a case study for a pilot on how to condense these huge numbers of contracts down into smaller amounts. Now, I mean, that's a great step forward, and I think it'll happen. It isn't, in some areas like them, I think it would be very simple to do that. In fact, I know that one of the people from the SIA went up there and came back with a plan to do exactly that. But for doing it on a broader scale, imagine what's happening. Essentially, you're going to 2 or 3 huge government agencies, all of whom have got these vertical strings of accountability into an organisation, and telling them 3, 4 or 5 of them, you've got to get yourself together and turn this into 2 or 3 strings, not 60. I mean, the Wise Group in Auckland, in Hamilton, I'm sorry, and you know, they don't mind people knowing that they've got something like 120 contracts going into one organisation. Yeah. And 20% to 25% of that is spent on administration, providing information that goes to Wellington and nobody bothers to open the envelopes, let alone read it. So it really is a huge opportunity. But you can see what's going to happen is a huge amount of bureaucratic infighting as people have to give up their control over the thing they're most interested in, because every one of these strings has got a public servant on the other end of it whose job it is to keep an eye on this. And so there are very large implications across it. So that's by way of saying it's going to take years to fix it broadly, but I think there are places like KYS that can operate on such a scale and it's mostly health and education, that they could do it quite quickly, and I'm hopeful that they will.
Well, hopefully they could template that as well. It's interesting, the navigator's almost needed on the other end of the equation to sort the government aspect out rather than
That's
the
exactly right. Well, I mean, that, you could say that half humorously, but that is actually the answer. That's the fundamental idea at the basis of social investment, is to tip the pyramid upside down.
Right, I'll take some questions. Look, just bearing in mind we are very time constrained today. We are finishing up at 11:30, so just bear that in the back of your mind there as well.
Thank you, Martin.
Oh,
through
thank
the
you, Robbie.
chair.
Sorry, I was
Thank
looking
you,
for the
thank you,
red-
Graham, and thank you, Claire. I'm ex-chair and architect for KYS, and I do keep in contact. And just 2 points. We have a facility in Old Tacky that was introduced 10 years ago for youth health, and over and above that, 140 young people have to come down to Paparam for their counselling. So it's very overstretched. And talking to the CEO, yes, she spends most of her time, getting funding from government agencies. We've had a outcomes model there for about 10 years now, and it's worked really well. So there's accountability fulfilled for any funding. Nicola Willis at the electorate breakfast meeting last week said that there's going to be a special funding package for the sort of youth facility, but I can see the difficulty there with all of the agencies that they have to apply to every year, and get that they have to close those down one by one and then go to a single agency, and the practicality is pretty outreached at the moment. But can you see any? I know you've just addressed that, but can you see any date for the government funding model kicking in, as was described?
For KYS?
Yes, such like...
Well, look, as I said, I was conflicted out of staying aboard that particular initiative, but I would read the fact that it was mentioned by Nicola Willis in a local meeting as a signal, because I know she knows about it, because I briefed her on it and proposed that she should attend to it before I became conflicted out. So we'll see what happens. But the timetable for the Social Investment Agency is they're going to open the window for proposals in August and again in November. But at this stage, it's sort of pilot projects because they're trying to bootstrap themselves into this. But I just would make a final comment. To the way I look at it, there are a whole lot of people out there doing social investment already. The government wasn't. They've got to catch up with what's happening out there and get out of a mindset that says there's something new here and we're going to manage it and arrange it and organise it, because that simply isn't the situation. And Bill English, who was previously the champion for this sort of thing, has a view that there are a substantial number of non-government organisations who are ready and able to commit themselves to goals expressed in terms of outcomes, and have the methodologies to do it. And of course, KYS is one of those, because it's got a thing they call Miro, which is the data they use that has tracked something like 10 or 20 years of case studies, which enables them to have all kinds of clever analytics done about what works and where do people go after they've left and so on. So I would think I'd feel pretty positive about them getting some benefit out of this, which could be an early pilot for how to consolidate contracts. But that's my hope. I have no inside information as to whether my hopes will be fulfilled.
Oh, thanks, Graham.
Lovely, thank you for that. Mike.
Thank you, Graham and Claire, for your presentation. A couple of brief points. First, Claire, have you had some pathways with our library staff in terms of this project? Because there's some relevant points at this early time of design.
Okay, I have mentioned it to your Connected Communities team, and they have talked to the design team, so I'm hopeful. That's correct, isn't it, Emma? Yes, yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah, so thank you. Yes, but I will be keeping an eye on it.
good. And just briefly, Graham, there's some sobering statistics in the northern part of our district regarding young people. Those rural areas, is there a path forward for improving those outcomes? I mean, I live in Te Horo. I connect with Otaki quite a lot. So clearly that's a serious pinch point in servicing those areas for these young rangatahi.
Well, yes, but we're the only people that discovered this. I mean, we did the work ourselves, and so what we have done is present it to people who ought to be in a position to do something about it. But what I would like to be able to do, and we'll keep pursuing this, is to get this information in front of whatever is happening as a result of Matt Ducey's announcements this week. But there hasn't been a place where money is sitting that might be used for this sort of thing. But look, I'll take aboard your request. I don't have a very good answer to it today because we've only had these announcements on Monday or something. But follow it up, and hopefully we'll be able to get this information put in a place where it'll have an impact.
Yeah, I just get cautious when I hear of new funding models.
Yeah,
There's
I
a fancy way of talking about this government running everything by an Excel spreadsheet. And looking for savings everywhere. We saw it yesterday's announcement around the census, which has huge implications on how we educate ourselves of important areas to direct funding and resource.
Yes.
So I would just hazard at that. When I heard it last week at by the minister about this model for a KYS, I think what is really driving that change, because it's complicated.
Yes. Well, look, I have presented this information to anybody I can find who's interested in. But it might be worth my while to talk to Think Hauora, because they serve a lot of people in Otaki as well. And I think they've probably got a more advanced way of thinking about collective community engagement around mental health services than the PHOs around here do. So I'll follow that up and hopefully something comes from it.
Lovely. John, I'm going to go to Nigel next, and then I'll pop into you after that.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Claire and Graham. Like you, I probably was initially going to welcome this 10-year plan until you have a look at it. I noted that the workplace shortages were removed from the report. So I think it's about 1,485 mental health workers are needed right now, and the final report removed that that's not in the report. We had one psychiatrist here on the Kapiti Coast who was part-timer. I don't know, and she left, just overworked. So I don't know if that system, anything's changed in that regard. But of course, it's really important for the government to provide tax cuts to wealthy people. So maybe that's the big issue, and corporate subsidies, of course, they have to do that as well. So just in terms of getting some immediate funding for Kapiti and pushing back against this, I've asked this before, but does KHAG see itself as having an active role in speaking out about these issues directly here?
I think so. It has to be an effective voice, and you're aware of the huge amount of work that's gone into the compelling case for a polyclinic, and that's the kind of work that's necessary for you to get listened to. But certainly, CAG can do precisely what you're just talking about, as long as its homework's in place and it has a convincing argument to get higher up the queue than you'll get otherwise. And we've got some of the material to be able to do that I've mentioned this morning, and an opportunity that just opened this week as a place to go to make such a submission. And we'll be doing that when we've got the homework in place.
Yeah, and I just would say congratulations to you guys. The report that you gave this morning, I think, is outstanding. The data that's in it is incredibly helpful. So yeah, superb.
Thanks, Nigel. And look, something I just wanted to note as well. the Capital Health Advisory Group's an excellent group, as you've just seen with regards to what's come forward there. But when we start talking about how we are going to step into the relationship with central government, it's one of the reasons we're looking at the MOU. That's going to be a very measured process, as such. Anything that's done in that space will obviously have to come through council, being in the advisory group aspect, to give weight to that, but also around the process behind this as well. So it's got to be. I think we're finding that. And the Capital Health Advisory Group seems to be it's definitely leading the charge on this, because they're just maturing a bit more. But as that maturity comes in, we're going to be looking at different pathways on that advocacy space as well, how to be effective. Getting guidance from our experts in this space is going to be essential, and also leaning on the expertise of our council officers as well, who have relationships in that space and know the pathways too. I'm hoping that a combined effort, I feel like, will start getting good results for carpeting. Johnny.
Thank you for coming today, Graham, and Claire. Look, you just sort of mentioned about, with the slips and falls and stuff like that, about prevention and having some financial benefits. And I know mental health is a really sort of complex sort of issue, and the cost to actually fixing somebody who is ill is not straightforward and costs a lot of money. So surely prevention of people actually requiring these services would be key, and I'm just wondering how you are going to sort of advocate for that, and how this group can advocate for preventing people from actually, and I know that's a real complex issue because there's a whole lot of other underlying things that sort of go that way. So just want some comments on that, please.
Well, when ACC gives us the claims data from around here, we'll be able to gauge whether the incidence of falls corrected for the demography of this community is above, below, or at best practice around the country. And if we were to find that we're below par, then the question is, well, how do we juice up these things that they do? And in the case of falls and fractures, you've got an unusual situation of a government agency with huge funds available to it, ACC, that I think would be persuadable that there's more people falling over around here and costing you a bomb than should be. So why don't you juice up the programs you've got around here? But I can't do that until I've used the data to find out whether we really are below par or on it. So far as promoting it more widely, if a rate of return of 520% and returns of $12 to $15 million per year for an investment, $1.5 million, doesn't motivate somebody in the health establishment to do something, I don't know what would.
Sorry, can I just add something? So, from the council point of view, if we find that there's not enough of these community, steady as you go programs and all the other ones that are out there, then there's probably things that the council can do to facilitate the use of space or advertising them and things like that, because I'm fairly sure that there's not enough community exercise classes actually happening in Kapiti, and that's where you've got to go. You've got to go and get people stronger so they don't fall.
Yep.
And in Canterbury, they actually used lots of people, including hairdressers and pharmacies and things, they educated them on looking for signs in older people that they might be likely to fall, and then refer them onto the programs. And that was the thing. It was a really community-focused prevention program. Yeah.
Okay.
And that is something that the local community could be active about, remembering that the rate of increase in institutional beds and rest homes for elderly people is way below the rate of growth of the people needing them. And so a lot of this isn't just sort of easily done by rest homes having gym classes or something. This is about reaching people in their
real
homes.
grassroots, real grassroots.
Okay, yeah, but in regards to mental health, I'm sort of thinking, prevention of actually people actually requiring mental health support.
Oh.
Now, because surely that's going to be cheaper than actually people actually requiring the support instead.
Yes, that's correct. But the two things I mentioned which are influential there, one of them is programs that deal with these young people earlier, because at the moment kids under 5 are getting virtually nothing. And yet the research is showing that quite a lot of things that happen to a kid before they turn 5 are going to show up in this area later in life. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is early attention to people who present with the issues and getting rid of the 6-month queues. And of course, that's exactly what the government's just said it's going to do. Now, whether they achieve that, I don't know. But they've recognised that having a kid being seen as possibly suicidal or just needing counselling and help and waiting 6 months to get the help is probably getting rid of that waiting list is probably the single biggest thing you could do to meet the objective that's implicit in your question.
It's a big ship to turn around, but hopefully it can be turned around.
The Monarchy program is criticised by other people around the country as being expensive. Now, you ask the people who did it, why was it expensive? And the answer was because the Ministry of Health insisted on a very large number of highly qualified mental health specialists being employed. Well, firstly, there weren't any to employ. And secondly, their experience was that for a lot of mental health services, people need counselling, somebody to talk to, somebody to help them fix a problem that is showing as a mental health symptom, but has got its causes in, abuse or bad housing or an illness of some kind, or being bullied in the school or something. You don't need a highly qualified mental health specialist to deal with it. And so their advice to us was that to ignore the argument that this is really expensive because a lot of the work is done by people you already employ.
Excellent, thank you. Jocelyn, you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Claire and Graham, for coming along in your presentation. It was very, very interesting. In fact, it's somewhat depressing, and I'm not saying, to me it is quite sad. So, I have to admit, I'm sort of a stats type person, but I suppose what I'm interested to know is in behind all the stats and the funding, how successful is the, I suppose, the recovery, or how many, do you have any stats on how many people do recover through going to counselling, having mental health issues, so they don't actually need to go back again? So, because I sort of see, so schools are the first starting point. It's almost like a progression thing that everyone knows about. You go to school, you go to KYS, and then when you get to 18, then you're sort of somewhere else in the ether. And I think that transition between 18 and an adult is also really quite difficult. So in terms of the young people involved, or the people involved, how effective is our current system in terms of their mental health?
Well, firstly, not enough is known, but let me say this, that two things. Firstly, around here, KYS has 20 years of data about what works and what hasn't for the people that they treat. Now, that data isn't publicly available, nor has it been input into a nationwide study or something, but data does exist. Secondly, the use of the IDI solves the problem at the end of your question, is what happened to them after they went off your books. And so with this kind of analysis, organisations like KYS would be able to say, well, these people arrived here with these symptoms. After the 5 years they'd been with us, some proportion of them had got a lot better, some are about the same, and there would be a few who had to go off into more serious secondary service or something. But now you'd be able to say, well, when they left you, then what happened? How many of them ended up in employment and didn't show up again in the mental health service? How many of them ended up in jail? I mean, all of this stuff is available through the IDI, and I think a very powerful addition to the knowledge that's sitting inside the provider arms. And I'm confident that the progressive end of this, though, in other words, the people who are willing to innovate and experiment, not get stuck in the way they've always done stuff, will start to use this data that's sitting in their systems in a more forward-looking and learning by doing kind of way. There's a lot of passive data that's there and not being analysed. And so I'd be pretty confident you're going to see a big improvement in the data around mental health, and then you'd be able to answer your questions and ones like it more satisfactorily. But it does require a lot of data to be integrated that's presently sitting in little isolated databases.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll wind that one up. Just another example of how blessed we are to have people of your quality involved in our Kapiti Health Advisory Group. I certainly know my understandings in this space are evolving through these meetings, and it is muchly appreciated. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the work program through the Kapiti Health Advisory Group, tying in with KCDC, progresses some of the kaupapa here. I'm just going to do a quick shout out. It's very interesting. Hitanga, the place where I live, there is a kaupapa there of helping young mums that have fallen off the tracks, but their kaupapa is around the first 1,000 days of life as such. And that's just, you know, if you just emphasised, we get that right, and that's a heck of a good first step as such. But thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll see you guys in maybe 6 months' time.
Yep.
If we're still at the table, guys.
Thank
Sorry.
you very much.
Righto. Where are we at? Okay, so we've got members of business. Any leave of absences requested? I haven't received any. Nope. Excellent. Matters of an urgent nature, I haven't received any. Members' items, look, to be honest, guys, I don't think we're going to have enough time for that today as such, but we'll see how we go at the tail end. I'm sure you'll be asking the questions, but I think we've got some nice juicy topics to bite into a little bit as well. So anyway, we're going to come up to updates, and the next one is around our community advisory groups. And we have Emma coming up, and Norie. Norie, I just got to say, your video, you're a superstar. And certainly appreciate getting the word out about the elections and people stepping into it. But a very approachable video, very approachable video. So obviously a few people have seen it, just saying.
I'm glad you liked it.
So,
Oh, yep,
welcome
sorry.
everyone. Yep. So we've got, well, I was just going to introduce. This is an update on the advisory group work, which it's come to this group a few times over the last 6 months. From we're going to do this work to sharing the terms of reference to recently recruiting new members for these groups, and so I'll hand over to Emma just to. I think she's going to talk through the updates of what we've achieved in the last couple of months in terms of recruiting these new advisory group members. So thanks, Emma.
Kia ora koutou. We will be very short. I know you have a short meeting. So we came and reported to you last year around the project to review the advisory groups. The chair also of the Older Persons Council and the Disability Advisory Group came on recently to update you about their take on the review and their perspective in terms of going forward. So this is a really short presentation just to provide you with some wrap-up actions that we've undertaken and then some information about the next steps as we relaunch the groups. So just to recap, we did a very in-depth review of the 3 advisory groups. The idea was that we worked alongside the chairs and the groups to co-design what we were doing going forward. There was a whole lot of work done in terms of different ways that the groups could engage and feedback. We had workshops, there were interview opportunities, many opportunities to feed back into the process, and we worked alongside them as we developed the terms of reference. So the terms of references have been approved and signed off, which is fantastic. And the recruitment of new members is underway, or actually completed for some of the groups, and Norie will come in and talk a little bit about that a little later on. And induction is underway. So just quickly, with the priorities for that came out of the review, they emerged as we worked with the groups, and that were part of the workshopping as well. So we did the interviews, we talked to people, we talked to elected members that were involved and other people within council that had come to the advisor groups, and then we themed those up and had a discussion with the advisor groups. So the three key things were that we needed to have a greater diversity and representation with the groups, that there needed to be a more robust selection process, and that we needed to work internally about how we work with our advisory groups. There were some different things across that for each of the advisory groups. So, for example, around selection for the Older Persons Council was that because there hadn't been a membership, it meant that there were many issues that kind of came out of that for the Older Persons Council. For the Disability Advisor Group, there were some things around strengthening diversity within that selection process. And the Youth Council, I'll talk a little bit later on as well in the presentation. So just a quick reminder, the community advisory groups, the Older Persons Council, Disability Advisory Group and the Youth Council, their expertise is their life experience, their knowledge and their connection to a variety of communities of interest, of need, and also geographic and ethnic communities within our district. They're not technical experts, so they bring their own experience to this. They are volunteers, and they're really chosen for what they can bring to the advisory group, and particularly their connections to community. So our advisory groups, these are the key things that they focus on. We've made it really clear what the objectives, work with them on what the objectives of the groups are. So we've set clear objectives. They are all now appointed, selected and appointed. There's a set term for membership of 2 years. That doesn't mean that it's 2 years, see you later. There's opportunity to come back, but it's an opportunity for them to see what they want to do and for us also to assess that alongside the chairs. We're going to have work programs with them as well. And some better structure and support around how we do this. I just wanted to say that this is the basics of doing good engagement. We're not doing more than what you would expect to do for good engagement on a community advisory group. Over to Nadia about the Disability Advisory Group.
Thank you. So the Disability Advisory Group, so we have a full group now, so how we did the recruitment was that we went through and tried to advertise as wide as possible. So we had radio, social media, everything kapiti. We tapped into all our networks, and I did drop-in sessions, physical drop-in sessions in all of our townships from Paikakiriki all the way to Otaki, just to break that barrier so that if people wanted to ask questions face-to-face, they could. If they needed help filling out an application form, I was there. For those that weren't comfortable using the computer, that I had physical copies there available for them also. So we went through and we screened all of the applications, and myself and the chair, Joanne, went through and we did a scoring system around that. The current members of the Disability Advisory Group, they still had to apply to show their interest in staying in the group. And that meant that we had all of the same details from each applicant as well. They didn't have to be interviewed because obviously we know them and we know how they work. So, and they had gone through a membership process in a sense. So we had that, and then the new members, they were all interviewed. So now we have 12 members. It covers a really diverse range of accessibility needs, but also we have 4 whakapapa Māori in there as well, which is really awesome. The group is incredible. I really love this group. We have some people who are leaders in the community in their space, so it's very exciting, and our age group is really cool. So we've got from 20 all the way up to 80, so very exciting. So we have done our first induction where the Mayor has welcomed the group, and that was really lovely. I missed it because I had COVID, which really sucks, but I heard it was a great meeting. And the next second part of induction is the groups getting to meet different managers throughout council, so we can start building that relationship and whakawhanaungatanga together. Thank you. So now moving on to the Older Persons Advisory Group. So the comms and the application process was the same as the Disability Advisory Group. A little thing that was different around this group was that the Older Persons Council wasn't a membership-based group. It was a public meeting that people could come and go as they please. And so every person that applied and we scored through, we interviewed, and then some made it through into the membership. So we have now 9 members from Paikakariki all the way to Otaki, and we are actively looking at having meetings to get some more diverse voices at the table, because there is a little bit of a gap there. Our first induction is next week, and so the 25th of June, and then their second induction will be in July, which will be that process of meeting managers throughout the council. And we will be, part of that will be designing a work program and talking about age friendly and how that fits into the group as well.
So Ella Tisdale is the advisor for the Youth Council, but she is away today. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Youth Council. Slightly different way of recruitment. The themes that came out of the Youth Council were the same, so those 3 priorities. But in terms of working with the Youth Council to get some more diversity within the group, there's decision with the Youth Council around the development of 2 stages of recruitment. So the first part of that is working to talk and see where the group of 18 and overs sit with a youth council. So it may be that we end up with a small group that connects in and comes in every second meeting, or we may have rotating representation at the table at every meeting, but we're still working through that with that older age group to make sure that it works for them and we can make this a sustainable youth council, to have that older voice, which we have had a lack of for a number of years. The other part of that is also working with Otaki, so we're working with rangatahi leadership groups in Otaki to see how they want to feed into the Youth Council, and again, making sure that we're really open about what the Youth Council can be to meet the needs of young people and get that diverse voice at the table. We also have 2 Youth Council meetings over the rest of the year that will be in Otaki meeting with rangatahi. And then the second, so that's the first stage, those 2 groups. The second stage will be the beginning of the year when the traditional recruitment of young people within secondary school happens, and that will be an open recruitment. So the full meetings continue on through the year with 2 in Otaki, and they have a new terms of reference, just at the same, very, very similar in terms of the Older Persons Council and the disability, in terms of the core objectives and what we're trying to do with the Youth Council. We're on what's next, great. So in terms of so basically, as we've talked about, after induction completes, the meetings start back in the next month or 2. And a really important part of that will be the development of a work program. So that's not going to happen meeting 1, it'll happen over the next few meetings once we kick into the full meetings occurring after induction. A really important part of the process is upskilling staff within council and doing better engagement from our side of things when we come to the advisory group. So we've got a guide for staff, and we'll be doing some key actions to make sure that when staff come to the advisory groups, they're getting the best out of the advisor group. And some of those things are really basic, like making sure that the information is accessible, making sure we've had enough time to prepare beforehand, making sure that we're really clear as council staff but why and what we need from the advisory group, and also making sure that we come back and we've thought about beforehand what we will do with that information, and when we can come back to the advisory groups and say, hey, this is what happened, or this is what's happened so far with your information and what you provided to us in terms of recommendations or ideas. And we will also work on the council advisory group relationship, including how groups report as we move into the new triennium as well. So there's a range of things in terms of the council advisory group relationship. There's the formal one in terms of coming to council committees. There's making sure that we do good support with our elected members who are appointed to the advisory groups, and then also making sure that we are bringing information to you in other ways and building a relationship between the advisory groups and council. Has anyone got any questions?
Lawrence.
Yes, thank you. It's great to see this update coming through for these important groups. So just a quick question. You're referencing councillors being appointed back to these advisory groups. Is that going to be normal for all three? Because I know that's not the case at the moment, or under the previous terms of reference that there were councillors appointed back to all three of those groups. Do we know that, or will that be a decision that will be made in the new triennium when when a new council's elected?
At this stage, we were at the continued elected members continue on and being connected, and that will be up to what happens in next triennium in terms of how that would operate.
Okay, so that's just probably a note for us as we move into the next triennium in our governance structure, how we formalise the connection to these advisory groups and make sure we are getting the best voice being heard at the table from them. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you, Lawrence. Kathy.
Thank you. I just want to say, yes, thank you for the job description. I mean, I won't be here next triennium, but it's really good so that councillors appointed back have, some guidance as to exactly what we're meant to be doing. But I just wanted to say, do these groups have funding? Like if someone in a wheelchair said that the gradient wasn't good coming off a footpath or something was happening, can that be done immediately? There is funding so that when they bring issues to the committees, it can happen?
It depends what it is. So some things would already be in a council program in terms of in terms of what's happening internally or what's happening with our work programs across council. But what we want to do is make sure that we get it to the right place. So if there are things that come through the advisory group that don't necessarily need to come to a committee, it might be actually internally, hey, this is something we need to work with the team on, and then we can feed that back. So there's different loops in terms of those ideas and recommendations from the advisor group, which could be internally within operations or coming to governance.
Right, yeah. And in the past also, each group's had expos, so there's funding if they wanted to do expos and that as well.
In terms of the budget for the specific advisory group, we have a budget for the advisory groups which covers things like the meetings, transport to get to the meetings, and for the disability advisory group in particular, support such as we have 2 deaf translators that come along to meetings from now on.
That's right.
So there is that funding to cover that. In terms of funding for projects, that sits within things like we have a small age-friendly project budget, which is our budget, but we would be working alongside the older persons advisory group on how that would work, because they hold as the advisor group the age-friendly approach as well alongside us.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
And I think that emphasises the importance, as Lawrence is pointing out, having a councillor connection there as well. And I think that between the two of them, the chair, they'll be following through on the important stuff will potentially come through to this sort of committee through a deputation potentially as well. Mayor Janet.
Yeah, just nicely follows on from what you just said actually, because this committee's been going really well. Congratulations on the work that's been done, and I just think we've got some incredible people that you've managed to unearth and bring into our fold, which is absolutely fantastic. So I just wanted to mention briefly that when I was meeting with Mayor Burney from Horowhenua at our regular catch up, we had a conversation about their community wellbeing committee that they have up there, where they receive formal report backs from their advisory groups, I understand, along with dashboards and progress. So it's something that I would like to turn my mind to over the next couple of months to set up for the next triennium, to make sure that the way that report back happens and the delegations, not just of the advisory groups, but also the committees, are set up so that that can really progress these groups in a meaningful way and formalise that communication that you're talking about. Because I don't think the ideal way for council to engage with advisory groups is through an individual elected member. I don't think it's the best. I think it's lovely for an elected member to be there and keeping an eye on things and bringing stuff back in a more informal way, but I think we need to focus on that more formal element of how those work streams travel through the machine of council.
And look, actually bouncing onto that one, I think you've got a potential framework there with the Capital Health Advisory Group, which has a work program, does report back as well. Taking on board definitely what you're saying. Good to have a champion in those spaces as well, but that's not the end of it by a long stretch. As such, very good points.
Yeah, so delegation is one thing. That's but what I'm talking about is formalising it so that it's embedded, so it's not relying on an informal invitation to come along to a delegation, so that it's embedded within the structure of the organisation. So that what happens now, what happens won't be a lot different potentially, but it just means that it's future-proofed and formalised so that everybody knows what's happening, and you don't end up with an hour-long delegation at the start of a meeting, for instance.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's a lot of good information that does come through. So it's finding that balance as such and the pathways that do that. Interesting about the older cohort there as well. I bumped into Evie at a meeting with Work Ready Kapiti just a couple of days ago, and said she's still involved. And that's great because she's been involved for 4 years now. So you've got that support coming in for the younger ones that are coming through, but also having that older, more, just trying to break into those areas there as well. And taking on board what you're saying, Lawrence, I think it's also important that tying to what the Mayor has just talked to, the importance of it being included as part of our induction process, or the induction process coming into the next triennium, just so that awareness is there from new elected members about the processes that are there and what groups are there as well. So no, awesome piece of work. I'm sure. Oh, sorry, Nigel, didn't see your hand up there. I had a look before, but I didn't see your hand up. So perhaps we pop over to Nigel for.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. First of all, thanks very much. This is superb. At the Waikanai Community Board meeting the other night, the Bridge Club came in for some funding for a ramp and some disability parking, which council was assisting with. I just wondered when these groups that are effectively private groups, I guess, but they perform public functions in these buildings. Are they able to tap into the disability advisory group just in terms of advice about potential funding, etc.?
Kia ora, Nigel. So with the groups, they can email us. We're going to we're in the process of setting up a contact page. So some people have direct contact with me, and other groups, if they don't, they'll be able to reach out. And sometimes things get diverted towards me, and then we just find the next course of action. So sometimes it would be me meeting with certain groups, and sometimes it may potentially be them coming in and seeing the disability or older persons advisory group, or it could be that it gets sorted out within council offices and it's not really at that level. So it just depends, it's case by case, and it depends what it is, but there are different channels and different ways of communicating with people and getting outcomes. Yeah.
Oh, great. And just on to point 16 on the Youth Council, as we heard from Graham and Claire earlier with KYS, people transition through KYS and then they leave, and then what happens after that. So when with the youth council, that's also people leave. I just wondered, is there like an exit interview for those who are leaving because usually when people are leaving, they'll give you then very honest assessment of what they thought was working and what wasn't working. So is that sort of process in place?
I'm going to say that the youth council are pretty upfront anyway, which is fantastic, and telling us what's working and what we need to tweak on, and how they want to do things differently. We do have opportunity when young people are leaving the youth council to meet with us. It's not a formal exit interview. Most people leave the youth council because they're leaving the district, so they're going off to do education in another place, or they're going overseas. They've finished high school. But as we move into having, and we're lucky that we still have Evie there, though I think she's heading off overseas soon. In terms of that 18 and over group and how they would want to engage with us, and then if they do leave but they're still staying in the district, what has worked and not worked in terms of that. So I think it'll be a work in progress in terms particularly with the older young people.
Yeah, and just finally, I think these advisory groups are really quite superb, and you see them maturing too in their processes. And I'm assuming that the advisory group chairs of the various advisory groups, they get together every now and then, and because they probably overlap.
The Disability Advisory Group Chair and the Older Persons Chair work together. The Youth Council, they rotate their chairs, so that changes. But we are looking at how we can, one, connect between our 3 community advisory groups, but with other advisory groups too, obviously, in terms of KAG as well.
That's terrific. Really good work.
Excellent. Thank you, Nigel. No more questions. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I've got my only note down here was awesome work. Keep up the mahi. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very, very much. There is a recommendation here for the table that the Social Sustainability Committee note the update of the Older Persons Advisory Group, Disability Advisory Group and the Kapiti Youth Council. Could I have a mover for that, please? Mike, moving. Could I have a seconder? Kathy, any debate? No? Fantastic. That's passed. Well, I have a vote too. That's a good idea, isn't it? Yep, fantastic. Sorry, my apologies. It came through the environmental. I'm waffling on. And it came through the environmental committee a couple of weeks ago. Just acknowledging Councillors Pravanov and Hadford at the table, and our CEO being back on board as well. Great to see you here, and that you made it back okay.
Can I borrow your phone? Can I borrow your phone?
Rightio. I pass it over to you, Chris.
Kia ora. And I'm going to say to you, as with the Climate and Environment Committee, we are pleased to be coming to the table to talk to you about something a little unusual that we're exploring. So I'll start there. We're exploring. And if you were at the Climate and Environment Committee, I will say bear with me. I'm mindful of time, so we are going to do a bit of an opening and talk to you about what we think the opportunities and challenges are of inclusionary zoning. So that's what we want to talk about. And really, just to really sort of focus us, what we wanted to put on the table with you is there's an opportunity for us to explore not just by ourselves, but with our regional colleagues, this thing called inclusionary zoning. And you might say, why would we want to do that? It comes back down to the opportunities and challenges, which I'll hand over to the team. But what I want to leave you with is inclusionary zoning effectively is one tool that we have in a wider suite of tools to think about how we can bring social and affordable housing opportunities into the community. That's really what it's about. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the only thing you do. Some people think it's great. Some people don't. But we've had a look at it because it's part of PC2. You wanted us to, and so we are. And so we're coming back today to go, we've done a little look under the hood of the engine, and we think there's something there. We're not saying to you today, sign up, let's get going, let's do it. We're saying to you, we think it's worth having a bit more of a look. The reason we're saying that to you is doing inclusionary zoning as a district by itself is senseless. And these guys are going to tell you why. For something like this to really get some legs, you would either start to engage regionally or nationally as one of those topics which makes sense to do together or not do at all. And so we have 6,400 dwellings planned over the next 5 years. That's a lot. That's a lot. And so the question I have is how many of those will be social and how many of those will be affordable? We've talked to you about wanting to grow well. We use the term sustainable development so that, yeah, we might be growing, but we want to do it our way. We want to grow well. This is one of the tools in the kit that we could consider. So it's only a consider, but we think we need to know a bit more about it and to maybe talk to some of our partners about, hey, what do you reckon? Could this be something that makes sense for us or not? So what I want to say clearly to you today is no decisions have been asked. The only thing we're wanting to get a nod from you about is, do we keep having a look at it or not? So Stephen and Esther are going to talk to you about just for them, the key opportunities and challenges, because we're going to take it as given that you read the paper and you read the prezzo. So I'm going to hand over the team and then we'll come back to you if that's all right.
I just wanted to make one quick comment as we moved forward, Chris. You mentioned that this was involved, we talked you through PC2. I'd also mentioned that this has actually been a conversation that's been going on since the housing needs assessment was done, and also was part of the conversation around the formation of the Community Housing Trust as well, as Queenstown was trying to look at options to bring options into that entity that they had down there as well. So this has certainly been an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and what I'm going to say to you is the team will probably lean into this, but this is one of those topics that you either talk about and get prepared for, or sometimes is given to you. So it has actually been in legislation before. And Stephen might talk about that. It's also been taken out. It might get put back in. It might come back out. We don't know, but we think it's worth having a look at it. And it is used overseas. So other people are using it. Other places it's actually doing okay. It's doing some stuff. So we're just going to talk to you about it and then see what you think. So I'll leave it to the team. I'll give it to you.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, I think it's clear that, housing affordability is a complex issue. And I think that often people think the response of providing more housing is going to bring the price of housing down and the cost of rental and home ownership. But I think the scale that would be involved in doing that is quite immense. And so I think the more tools that we have in place to create affordable housing opportunities, the better. And I think we need to be clear that inclusionary zoning or inclusionary housing isn't a silver bullet, but it's part of a menu of approaches that can be taken. I think the opportunities it gives is that a requirement for a percentage of a development to be affordable, or for payment being made in lieu of putting that into the development, creates a more stable way of providing affordable housing. And typically, you would work through a scheme where you would have a housing trust or a community housing provider or iwi provider, etc., actually manage those units. The other thing to consider is how do you make those affordable units affordable for future years? It's not just a one-off. And we should be clear too that this is the terms social housing and public housing sort of get used together. This is not public housing. This is affordable housing, sometimes called social, but it could be rental and it could be home ownership as well. But you would want to create a scheme where you ensure that the subsidies involved continue on and aren't a windfall to one particular individual or whānau. I think it's clear that a regional or national approach is required, and as Chris pointed out, I think part of the issue is that sometimes in New Zealand we seem to think this is a very alien and unusual thing to do, but it's very common in the rest of the world. And it was Helen Clark's Labour government introduced an act that enabled local authorities to develop inclusionary zoning. And part of the approach in that act was to undertake a housing assessment first, a housing needs assessment, before any schemes were created. So in some ways we've worked through a process where actually in a good place to be exploring this, but it is a complex issue, and I think a regional or national approach is required because of the considerations you need to bring to developing how it could work. I think the resources involved, as well as we know that it's not popular in some parts of the community, and there's legal uncertainty, and working together you can pool the resources and reduce some of the risks around what you're doing. But I think it is, we're talking about a start of a conversation, and I do think that working together is, there'll be more certainty that it will go somewhere and be successful. So you've done a lot of work in terms of looking at other jurisdictions where it has been introduced and how well it works there.
Kia ora koutou. So we've, during our preliminary research, we've looked at Queenstown next, which is the most evident nationwide. And it's not just Queenstown, it's Waipa, Waikato, and Hamilton District Council. So these councils, they are working towards a regional collaboration towards inclusionary housing, and they call it the Future Proof Partnership. So the outcome is yet to be determined, but they're working on it. And one of the things that I've noted, there are other organizations. We've got Community Housing Aotearoa, who are actively investigating, trying to figure out ways how local councils can integrate inclusionary zoning in their planning provisions. But like Stephen mentioned, there is still a lack of legal clarity, and often governments, whatever comes, they kind of overlook the challenges that we are operating in a market economy where developers naturally chase profit. So there's a lot of challenges, but there is a solution, and one of them being going through a regional approach where we could advocate for a national reform, or we could do something regionally so that any challenges like developers going elsewhere could be in a way mitigated. So yeah, and the just in terms of going regionally as well, it's not like it comes without risks. There are, of course, risks that when you go regionally, there is timing issues, there's flexibility issues, and then, you know, districts might prioritize some work over the other. And in that case, we could always have we could always see it internally how we could be the ones leading this kind of project in a way that it benefits our district.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the focus, I'd say.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's a curly one. There's no doubt about that, but I think it's one that we need to step into. The reason I say that, just noticing, attending the Regional Waste Mineralisation Forum and also potentially the transport one as well, but the waste one, the larger councils seem to think that they can pull Swifties on you with regards to direction and that sort of thing. So I quite like the idea of us front stamping this with regards to holding some of them to account and helping keeping things in line as well, especially since I think the timing is quite good now. 6,400 dwellings coming into the district. We want to actually try something in place before that really kicks in, so we can capitalise on that for the lower socioeconomic. But looking at the Queenstown model, there's some really interesting kaupapa there around land rental, rent for life, all that sort of scenario there as well. And fundamentally, it's one of the reasons we set up our Community Housing Trust as well. But look, I'll put it out for questions. Mayor Halborough.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's certainly a really interesting thing to be exploring. I noted in the document that there were a number of legal hurdles that people couldn't get over. Can you just give me an example of some of the legal issues with this?
Yeah, sure, I can take that. So in the past, there has been legislations, like Chris mentioned. We had Affordable Housing Enabling Territorial Authorities Act in 2008, which was repealed, and although reasons were not explicit, but there is of course that push back from developers, because there's a lot of just to start with, sorry, I should have started with that, is inclusionary zoning. When you apply that, the process is lengthy. It's the devil is in the detail, so it's got a lot of fish and hooks. And we had Special Housing Areas Act as well, which was also repealed because it did not improve affordability. So, and in terms of QLDC, they had this plan change variation, but it didn't go through, as the panel thought there was not enough supporting analysis. So
I'm just going to say, just very simply, I think some of the big challenges are it's a plan change, and so it's not something that everybody likes. Developers will submit because it impacts them, so it's quite a political thing. Some people think that if you put it in this district, developers won't come here, they'll go to another district. So the idea of mass, of regionally doing it together, it reduces some of those risks. And then there's whether there's a national direction similar to something like PC2 and medium density. So if I get really down to it, Janet, that's some of the challenge. So it's whether you've actually got the ability to get it across the line. So it might be a really great idea, it might be really hard to land. So that's kind of, I think, some of it. But Stephen,
I think one of the big issues is the current resource management framework doesn't explicitly support mandatory use of inclusionary zoning. So that creates the legal uncertainty, and because it's around the enforceability under the Resource Management Act. So that's the key reason why several councils who've been interested and put up proposals have withdrawn them or softened their approach because they can be open to challenge.
Yeah, so, yeah. Without support nationwide, I think it's quite challenging. I'm wondering if sneaking it in through the Going for Better Housing Growth consultation that opened yesterday is a good idea. I went to the breakfast where Chris Bishop announced that and various other things, including ministerial powers, which could stop us doing stuff like this. But it quickly morphed into a conversation about affordable housing and emergency housing, which was completely unexpected and not on the agenda. So it is top of mind, you know, for the current government. And it comes up, you know, linked to this idea that we need growth is the idea that we need affordable housing, of course. So I'm wondering if we tie it into that, because otherwise getting it through regionally will be quite challenging, and doing it alone, problems with competition in terms of providing that growth and potential ministerial intervention, I would have thought.
Yeah, I will say that we have talked to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development about this. It is a policy tool and lever, and it's fair to say that this government is not putting in legislation around it. And that's what we've heard back from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. And the reason I said what I did about developers is it depends what kind of growth you want. You can think of other tools other than inclusionary housing, incentivising rather than trying to restrict. And so part of the question we have and why we are looking at this is 6,400 houses that are not affordable is going to push people out of this district. And so the question is, what opportunity is there for us to think about that as we balance that growth? So it doesn't have to just be this. There can be other things we bring to the table. If this one is just too hard, we'll come back. But we didn't want to go and do a whole ton of work if there's no appetite for it. And our view is it's a regional or national thing that gets you across the line. Doing it alone is probably not the best idea. Yeah. But open to any thoughts.
I'm probably more of a comment than a question. There's a lot mentioned in here that the RMA is the sticking point of making this stick or not. We know that RMA is under review, and it's going to be we're going to get a picture of what that looks like. Is there any indication that there's going to be room? I would suggest that there's not going to be room for inclusionary zoning in the changes to the RMA, because it seems to be they're loosening things, not to make growth happen, rather than putting more barriers in the way of growth, which some would see that IZ is one of those. So, I mean, just an indicator, does the RMA do that, the new reviewed one? Because seriously, if the RMA isn't going to change to a point where it enables this, bigger councils within us, with more resource than us, have said we're not willing to go down this road of risk while the RMA's in play as it currently exists. So my question would then be, why would we, as a smaller council, try to go somewhere where no one else has, because the risks are too high?
Yeah, I think two things. The reason we talk about regional is because we agree. Don't do it by yourself. Do it together, nationally, regionally, or we're kind of trying to say here, or don't do it. Remembering that this was one of the items on the list that we were to come back to talk to you about. I think, secondly, the RMA might be the reason that this has been hard, but it's not the only tool that governments have. And I would suggest that whilst the government may be swinging a certain way with the RMA, they're also swinging into some other zones around social housing. So they are coming in quite hard and wanting to do stuff locally. It's very decentralised. It's very much lifting local. That seems to be their intention. So there's other mechanisms. There's other things we could think of. We are definitely saying, we're not saying to you guys, go for it. We've said this is what we've found. It could be useful, but it has to happen a certain way.
Second question, what stomach is there regionally for this conversation?
We are asking you first whether you're interested before we do that. And the reason I'm going to say it that way is some of the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee work that's underway is focused on housing. And because we have so much housing growth, they're looking at us to lead stuff. And so we don't want to do work that's not helpful. And we also don't want to do work for the sake of it. We've got developers, we've got investors. We're working with you on how we want to grow. So we are trying to work out what would we put forward that was useful. Inclusionary housing and Papakaiinga were the two that we had on our list. And Papakaiinga is a no-brainer for us, so that's a really good thing to do. And we are doing a lot in that space with our iwi partners through our place-based steering group and our district planning. And so this was one that was on the table. That aside, we don't want to put something into the regional space that you don't support. So we came here first, so that we could then determine, is that something we do or propose as an opportunity?
Okay, I've probably got comments, but those are my questions at the moment.
I might go to Nigel online.
Yeah, I would just suggest that we shouldn't be making policy based on who is in central government. We should be making policy based on what's good policy. I'm a big supporter of this inclusionary zoning, and the mechanism itself takes us towards spatial planning, which is what we should be having regionally. Yeah, I think spatial planning is crucial. This is a part of getting to that. I know in point 9 that you're talking about requiring or incentivising developers. I far more in the requiring than incentivising, but that's a debate that would be had, no doubt. Minister Bishop yesterday, the fact that he came out and basically said we're going to disempower councils in this housing space and some other changes under urgency to the RMA, I think should be taken seriously. He clearly meant it, but I don't think that should stop positive work. I think we should still be doing and participating in regional decision making around this sort of stuff. I think Chris is right. 6,400 dwellings over the next 5 years. If there isn't some inclusionary zoning, if we haven't taken that and looked at that regionally, then what the government's policy will do is create ghettos, and we will be a party to that, and I don't want to be a party to that. So, and just finally for me, the idea that somehow we create policies and developers won't come here, that has been used as a scare tactic for the last 30 years on the Kapiti Coast, and it has never happened. Developers do not go away. They know where the gold is buried, and most of it's here on what used to be called the Gold Coast, and so the developers will not stay away when there are massive profits to be made, and they will keep coming. But if we don't take care of the kind of housing that we need as well, then we will be culpable. And this inclusionary zoning discussions, I think there's absolutely, it's essential that we be part of those discussions. And just finally on Plan Change 2, we're already seeing some of the unintended consequences of, and I'm saying that generously, the unintended consequences of Plan Change 2, where we are starting to see intensification in our residential areas where it was never intended to be. So these broader discussions we should be part of.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Not really a question, but appreciate that, and it's sort of that looseness around that as well. But appreciate the input there, Johnny.
Yes, and look, I may risk offending people here, but I don't really like what I see here. I sort of see it as a sort of form of socialism, really trying to force developers to do some of their to force them to put up part of their development for this sort of thing. My question is there a statutory requirement for us to look at this inclusionary zoning, or is it just because we've committed to investigating it? And if it isn't a statutory requirement, why are we doing it?
Okay, I'll say it's one of the tools in the statutory toolkit. Council asked us to look at it, and we're bringing it back. So this is part of our report back to what we got asked to do this triennium. So that's what we're dutifully doing as your officers. And so you're seeing our exploration today. So that's why we're saying we're trying to get a pulse around the table of what do you think. So, so that's where we've come from.
You've got my pulse. Oh, there was just one other thing. I know this is a really complex issue and stuff like that, but we've also had developers and builders come to this council and say that, you know, it's cost them more for a consent to actually do the work that they wanted to do for digging a hole for a swimming pool, for example. So, I mean, you know, perhaps we need to look at some other things that are causing, you know, the cost for housing.
Any tools in that kit, also?
No. I think I did want to say before, and I'm going to say it. I'm not surprised at Minister Bishop's comments this week, because if you talk to any developers or anyone out there at the moment, they're very confused because the government's saying this and legislation says that, and they're asking government to hurry up, and there's a whole ton of reforms due by December. So the government is now fast-tracking something and saying they won't be ready to do stuff till 2026. That's no surprise at all. I think the idea that we need to grow is what they're saying. And actually, at our hui last week, Nicola Willis said to us that obviously they're loving that we're planning and looking to grow well. I don't think there's intention that we don't grow well. And it's these tools in the kit. We talked to you recently about urban panels. We don't have those here, but they're in the toolkit. They've been there forever. This district just doesn't use it. And so we are exploring some stuff with you so that as we talk about growing well, you have an opportunity to help us do that. If you don't use the tools, it means there's gaps. And when there's gaps, there's unintended consequence. So that's what we're looking at with you. And we say that this is one tool. If you are concerned that affordability of housing and lack of, I'll do social, housing and affordable housing, be it rent or ownership, isn't going to be part of our future, then this is something you would look at. If you're not worried about that, you wouldn't look at it. So we're not saying do it. We're saying it's a tool, and it's open to you.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Rob?
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, just your comment about the government sorting their reforms out by about November, December. Does that include the RMA? Perhaps we should just hold fire till that's sorted. But hey, look, just referring, just with regard to the surprises we've had with some developments since Plan Change 2 has been kicked in. Could you just clarify clause 18 3.1 where you've said the potential for IZ to desensitise development or lead to lower housing quality? Could that sort of mean that developers could use this as a mechanism to build really cheap and nasty houses, like we've seen one or two approach that MSD, they call it, MSD housing in the middle of their 500 house developments? And could it be a mechanism to go down that road?
I think I'm going to frame it this way. Those comments came from the Climate Environment Committee members. That wasn't part of the analysis that we undertook or found. The concerns that were raised were that developers, well, I'll say it this way, they're not socially focused. So if they were forced to, I don't know, for every 10 houses you build one as an inclusionary zoned social house, that they would either take away green space or they would use cheap materials so that they didn't lose money. So that was that conversation. That's not from us. So no, I'm not going to say that that's what we found, but that was a concern that was raised around that table.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Kim?
Kia ora. Mine's a quick question, and it kind of relates to what Councillor Wilson talked about in terms of the exodus of developers if we use all the tools in our basket. Is there any data around that? Because we hear it all the time. Is there any actual data?
Well, what I'm going to say to you is, despite the fact that somebody said it's really expensive to build here, or to get a resource consent here, or to do many things here, we are going to come back to you and to show you the comparison. We're doing some benchmarking at the moment as part of our improving our local regulatory system. So I'll let that speak for itself. But what I will say to you is, when we've talked to other councils, the feedback that they get from some developers is their district is the most expensive and the slowest and the worst and a bunch of stuff. I don't know how real that is, but we also get told that, and we're in the same region and sometimes we're neighbours. So it depends, but we'll come back and share that with you.
Great.
What I will say is we've got a lot of developers here who want to be here, and I don't know if you know, but the two places in New Zealand that people want to be right now is Kapiti and Queenstown. So you do the math. One thing you might want to think about is if someone leaves who doesn't want to do stuff that helps us grow the way we want to, is that someone else will come in? And I think that might be your point, but we will make sure we bring that back to the table. But I'll say to you anecdotally, we have a lot of developers here. We are not without demand. And in fact, I mean, I won't share who, but at the moment, developers are actually squabbling over trying to get stuff. So to me, what it's going to cost for this isn't going to be the thing that breaks the bank.
Kia ora.
Lovely, thank you. Look, my apologies, Jocelyn. I'm going to stop the questioning because we are on a very tight timescale as such, and this has already been through your committee with regards to comment around this. So sorry about that.
I don't agree with that, unfortunately.
That's your right to
Mr.
do so.
Chair.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a mover for these recommendations. And do I have a seconder? I'm happy to second. Would you have right of?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this. I think we've heard the kind of slight hesitation around this and some of the concerns, but I'm happy with the recommendations because, as you say, it's in an exploratory phase. It's a discussion to have with the leadership forum, which I think will be useful no matter which way it goes, because I don't think we're thinking enough about affordable housing across the region. We're thinking about housing provision, but it's a good way to kickstart that conversation. So really happy, and thanks for the work that's gone into it.
Any other comment? I think most people have commented in regards to this. Look, I just wanted to mention as well, this has been 5 years in train with regards to, so our housing programs, 5 years train. Rob, you made a mention that, would this be sorted out by November? I don't see this getting sorted out in the next couple of years. It's a pathway, and this is just one of those levers that we're going to be working on with regards to that. So we will see how that goes as we push it through the process as such. Jocelyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that one of the recommendations talks about this council taking a lead in this work when talking to other councils. In terms of where it landed with the Climate and Environment Committee, I think that committee was happy to have some involvement, but not necessarily to take the lead in it. And I just want the members here to consider that.
Okay, that was, to be brutally honest, a comment that came out of your committee. I do realise that was a comment that came out. It was one of many comments that came out of the committee. But thank you for bringing it to the table. Yes. Do I have any other comment? No? So,
Yes.
If we could vote on that. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? Yep, did you want a division at all, Johnny? Okay, no troubles at all. So that motion's passed. Thank you very much. Now, I am very, very conscious of time, but I did ask for a paper to come to the table around the process with regards to people going into the housing development on Old State Highway 1. I'm picking that everyone's read that paper, so could I just very quickly ask council officers to comment on that? Would be much appreciated, and then we'll close the meeting off.
Kia ora. Take the paper as read. The paper just outlines that we had been working on Ōtaki with MSD, Kāinga Ora on the social housing list and how we ensured that local people were able to get local housing. And that had proved so successful that we have now started to come into the wider district, and we are working with Te Atiawa, and we are working with Kāinga Ora and MSD, and starting to look at how we can ensure that our people across the district are getting on the right lists. Kāinga Ora is doing well. There's some lovely opportunities coming up here. It looks like it's coming quickly, and we want to make sure that our people are in the right place to stay in and get the highest priority. That's it in a nutshell.
I just had one question. Are we also discussing how that area up there will be managed in an ongoing way? As well, I think one of the community concerns are once that opens up, how that is going to be managed by Kāinga Ora as such, being a potential for, should we say, some social issue there.
I'm just going to say the paper that we've tabled today doesn't cover that.
Yeah.
We can definitely come back and provide an update at another meeting.
That's no troubles at all. I appreciate that. And just wanted to say thank you very much for that piece of work. It went very well in Ōtaki. It's always been something that a lot of our community have been concerned about, that we are looking after our locals. So it's good to see that we are looking at being proactive in that space. So thank you very much. Okay. Confirmation of minutes.
Happy to move the recommendation.
Oh, my
that's on that
apologies. There's a
paper.
recommendation to move. There's a noting recommendation to
Mr.
moving
Chair.
there. Thank you for moving that, and thank you for bringing it to my attention, Deputy Mayor Kirby. That's seconded. Do I have any comment? No, that's fantastic. All those in favour? Thank you. That's passed. Aye as well. So
Happy to
moving on
move the minutes too.
Sorry?
Happy to move the minutes.
Fantastic. Mayor Holbrook, I'm picking you happy to second that. Excellent. All those in favour? No comment? Excellent. Yep. So it's just the minutes, number 9.
You're on Zoom.
We've moved all that. It's been seconded. Any comment? No. So all those in, if you care to vote, all those in favour? Aye, accepting those. That's fantastic. So we just move to the closing karakia, and I'm just going to pop through this in Te Reo English. May blessings be upon us all, and our businesses be successful, so that our words endure and our language endures. May the spirit be strong. May Māori be settled and in balance. Among the activities we will do today, join, gather and unite, forward together. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you in 6 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
I'm getting a cup of tea.
I'm going to open the meeting and take a break.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait for you to open.